Welcome to AI for You. Today's use case is about getting the information that ChatGPT knows about you out of the tool. We know that these tools learn a lot about us, our businesses or institutions, and they create better outputs for us based on that information. But sometimes we want to use a different LLM that we know performs some tasks better than ChatGPT. The prompt in today's show notes will help you pull that information out of one LLM so that you can use that as a resource inside a different model that may not know you so well. In today's episode, we're talking with Tom Andriola, the Chief Digital Officer at UC Irvine. Let's jump right in. Welcome to AI for You. I'm Brian Piper, an AI and content marketing consultant, helping higher education institutions become more effective and efficient. This show explores practical, actionable ways that higher education professionals can integrate AI into their workflows to solve real problems and create more meaningful human connections. Each episode delivers a specific use case you can implement today, followed by an in-depth conversation with experts who are successfully leveraging AI in admissions, marketing, advancement, and across a campus. You'll walk away with concrete strategies, tools, and inspiration to make AI work for you and your institution. Tom, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Brian, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here today.
So start off by telling me a little bit about some of the different ways you're using AI in your work at UC Irvine.
I felt really fortunate to be at an institution that, one, recognized what AI had the potential to do and was so open-minded for us to think about it touching so many different parts of the university and the mission. We created an AI group looking at teaching and an AI group looking at the student experience and student services and AI in research and AI in industry collaboration and AI in terms of what happened over at the hospital, right? So we had kind of all of this. And, the backdrop was, as we started to understand these tools, that we needed to reimagine our work in a world where we had tools available to us. And I like the word tools to get away from the hype. Tools available to us to allow us to really rethink how we delivered on aspects of the mission. And so with that backdrop, it really kind of opened up the framework to put any and every question on the table. And not that you wanted to move on all of those things or you wanted to move on all those things now, but it was kind of a latitude that, as I talked to colleagues across the country, there wasn't that type of latitude everywhere. Maybe there was a discussion about teaching, right? Or maybe there was a discussion about admissions and enrollment, but we feel like we had everything on the table that was open. And so that was really cool. And I feel pretty fortunate for that. Where I think we started was, and again, it wasn't necessarily me and my central role, but it was finding the natural innovators who kind of saw something, wanted to do something, and were starting to run. So we used 1,000 flowers bloom concept that we always rail on in higher education about how hard it is to move the needle. Well, we actually used it to our advantage. We said, let's let our innovators, drop seeds, and then let's watch which seeds take, come back and call it together, and then figure out where do we want to double down and start pouring the water, because we only have so much water, right? So using that analogy, our admissions enrollment people started to play with the first chatbots, for example. And what we did was they had great success, and they had success on a couple levels. Their metrics of being able to answer, 72%, 84%, 92% without human interaction for all that repetitive stuff was a great metric story. There was a second story that we used, and we put them kind of into a storytelling forum that we have called Digital Discoveries, which is tell us this innovation that you're working on, was the concept of how did we build a chatbot for the institution that was accurate, reliable, and something that we could turn the work over, and who was responsible for watching the model going forward to make sure that it was still providing high quality, accurate answers. Because I think that's the other thing is everybody wants chatbot now. Not everyone is willing to commit to how to do it right and how to maintain it so that it's good 12 or 24 months from now. So they were some of our early adopters. And then student affairs came around and basically said, we see things and seeing what they did, we see stuff in the student experience that we can start to do, around housing, about how our most vulnerable students could get to the right people, to just answering questions. And then financial aid came back and said, this would kind of work for us. Right. And then all of a sudden, some of those people who straddle the academic administrative line started to say, wow, this is kind of interesting. I could see this in my classroom by doing X. And all of a sudden now you had professors who everyone says, oh, they're fighting this stuff. They started to understand it enough to say, hey, it's usable. And so that's the way it kind of has evolved with us is it's natural innovators, giving them the latitude to innovate and to experiment, and then finding what was working and making sure others knew about it to then build a kind of a positive reinforcing flywheel.
I think that's such an important way to scale as you find those opportunities for the quick wins, for the metrics to be able to present that story and share that story with a broader audience. But at the same time, you're using your enthusiasts, you're using people that are already naturally interested in the technology to kind of lead the charge on that.
Yeah, I think what I found in over the course of my career is that no matter what type of organization you're in, there are always kind of natural innovators, and they're not always the same people, across different topics, but there's a natural set of innovators who want to make whatever it is better, right? They're dissatisfied with the status quo. But the larger group that you want to activate are the fence sitters, right? If you look at the change management philosophies, right, there's a large percentage of people who they're just not the people who run right into the ocean when they get to the beach. They want to see that it's safe, that the water's warm. And so they're watching the innovators and they want to know it's okay for them to take the risk. And so that's the group that we let the innovators innovate, help them be successful, tell them how special they are, and then have them talk to the fence sitters and see what percentage of the fence sitters will jump on board and try to do something themselves. And then when that number gets to 30%, 40%, then you've got a critical mass where now your momentum is not something you have to focus on, like, how do we keep this going? But it's more of and this is where I think we're at with the AI, which is, okay, so we have a lot of examples, but do we really have a enterprise or institution-wide, this is how we scale deployments in a way that's consistent and affordable, and in a way that reinforces that everyone gets benefit to all these things, right? So we've done the experimentation thing. Now I think we're at the point where it's like kind of that, how are you deploying at scale? And I think that's the questions that we're asking ourselves and trying to figure out, do we have the right strategies to get there?
It sounds like you are at an institution that is eyes wide open to the opportunities and capabilities of these technologies. You've got some leadership support, obviously. What do you think it is that makes so many institutions out there hesitant to adopt? Or what do you think the challenges are that are unique in higher ed that makes people like hold off and wait for, I don't know what they're waiting for.
Yeah. Well, I think it's complex. I really do think there's a lot of complexity in this. And you can look at past technology movements. It's been the same story, right? Just plug in a different antagonist. So I think it comes down to is like, we think like institutions, right? Which is we have long histories and we have long horizons, and we think that we can endure change, that we will endure no matter what. And I think that right now is a little bit in question, but I think that mentality of we've been here for 150 years, we'll be here for 150 more, makes us a little bit more of, and sometimes it's a lack of curiosity at what's going on in the outside world. And I think that's the dangerous one, is when you lack curiosity about what's on the horizon or what's now available, I think you become vulnerable. The second thing here is I think there's a genuine, is this really better for our students and for our faculty and for our staff and employees? It's, where's the evidence? It's like, okay, we have new tools. I could be doing this differently. And, think about active learning in the classroom, right? That we would have been talking about if we were doing this 3 to 5 years ago. How many faculty kind of thought like, show me the evidence that there are better engagement and better learning outcomes if I do this flip classroom thing that you're doing. So I think there is this kind of general skepticism that comes along and people are like, prove it to me. And that's why it's so important that the innovators, you help them be successful because they want to hear from their peers, whoever they consider their peers to be. Could be faculty to faculty within the same department. It could be UC Irvine talking to their colleagues at Michigan and Indiana or Notre Dame or wherever it might be. So I think we want to be convinced that it's better, right? So I think that's the second, reason why our movement might be slow. And then there's a third one that this, especially with the hype, there's just so much talk about, is this going to replace me? And if it's going to replace me, I certainly am not going to help it happen faster. I joke, it's like, for some people, they're on a mental clock. I'm going to graduate in 5 years. So I just have to gradually adopt this thing such that it doesn't disrupt my 5-year plan. Right. It's a very logical way to think, but I think there is this genuine. So what's my value proposition? If I kind of help make this happen at my institution. And I think there's 2 levels of that in my scene. It's I've ignored it and I haven't played with it because I'm fearful of what I don't understand, resistance. And then there's I've been playing with this thing. I realize how good it is. And now I'm really scared that I don't add value in the situation. So I've seen 2 levels of resistance. One is I'm now aware enough to understand what this thing could do. And I've seen that with even deep subject matter experts who come forward and said, being a PhD student is completely changed now based on what these tools can now do. Being a software engineer is completely changed now that you see what these tools can do. So it's complex. And so that's why you said the key word, it's change management, right? This is really what the challenge of the day is.
So what advice do you have for institutions who haven't started experimenting with AI even?
Get people playing with these tools just to experiment and play and wrap their heads around what they are and what they can do. We kind of curated our own kind of platform, gave people an option if they wanted to play with different models. And we just gave it to them and said, hack your own productivity. And one of my things was, but we want you to also talk about it, right? Like, I think you've seen me on stage say things like, I've taken 6 to 8 weeks out of my schedule through the use of these tools by making me more efficient. Everyone would love to have 6 to 8 hours back. And what I've seen is that everyone can do things to find 1 to 2 hours and then 2 to 4 hours. And so our attitude was just get people playing with this, because what comes out of that is someone says, it's actually pretty cool. I didn't think I was going to be able to do this, but now that I've done this, I have this new idea that has bigger scale, right? And so you just kind of get people rolling down, they're over the fear and they're starting to play with it. So I think that's the first thing. It's like, if you haven't started, start. When you talk to the people who are really creating value from this, and again, I'm talking about across all industries, what they'll talk about is there is no substitute to just getting started. And the sooner you get started, the better off you are, because we're all traveling the same journey. It's just some of us are a little further in the journey. So I think that's where it is. It's like, get people start playing with these so they can wrap their heads around it. Just like we all wrapped our heads around ultimately what the internet was and then what it could do. And then how ultimately we could start using it to make, things better, whether it was more accessible or more efficient or whatever it might be. The second stage I talk to people about, and this freaks people out, is like, you have to build a relationship with these tools. And that's, and because I really do believe that when you move from, this is kind of cool, I can write emails better, or this is kind of cool, I could like make sure I'm looking at the best articles and keep myself informed on the thing I'm supposed to be an expert in, to this is now a colleague that I trust who becomes my sparring partner. And I can tell it to be, a world-class financial expert, or I can tell it to be someone who's very, very deep in American history. You all of a sudden start to build this kind of relationship, and different from, I have to find an expert in each of these 4 fields. I just have to give it a persona to be an expert in the field. And it gives me, I tell people, like, it gives you 80% expertise, not 100%. You're not a world expert, but even some of the world experts say it's at the 90th percentile, right? So I drop it a little bit to not scare people too much and say, if you had if you were looking at a financial situation and you had access for free to an 80% Goldman Sachs financial analyst for free. Would you take it? And that's kind of, it's like, well, that's what we've given you at the university.
Talking about changing your perception, changing the way you work with these tools, we see the technology, the tools evolving very quickly, changing rapidly, offering new capabilities. And a lot of times we don't even understand, even the engineers who are creating these tools don't really understand all of the possibilities and the use cases. Where do you see this technology going in the next few years?
The tough one, right? I mean, you can ask Sam Altman that question, and like he has his perspective, and like who knows? I think it surprised all of us, even people in the technology industry who are, who've watched all these different trends, how fast it's evolved. I mean, no one would have thought you would have so much expertise so available that we'd be talking about agentic so quickly. So it really, it really has evolved fast. I think I'm going to answer your question, Brian, less about where these tools going to be, what they're going to be capable of, because I think the capabilities are not really the issue. The capabilities are going to be far beyond anything you and I can even comprehend. It's where are we going to be comfortable using them, I think, is really the issue. Because what I've seen over the course of my career is the organizations that can lean into the next better set of tools quicker build competitive advantage. And again, competitive advantage could be I'm the market share leader. I make the most money amongst all my peers, right? I have the best student outcomes, right? I have the best, the most innovative research, portfolio. So, we can bring the context back to superior outcomes as a general statement. I think it's like, how can you get your organization to 90% of the people are using these tools in a way that make them the best version of their self in terms of their contribution to the organization? And then, institutionally, are you able to use them to shape whatever's on your strategic plan? I think that's what I think about more than what the tool's going to be able to do, because there's going to be some entrepreneur out there in Silicon Valley who's going to be using the tool for something that you and I are, that are even going to freak you and I out. What I really think is, if you think about this, right, there was a time when people thought the internet was just going to be a fad. Like my kids don't understand that the internet was not, Bill Gates didn't believe in the internet. At some point, it's going to be like, well, yeah, we're all using these tools, right? But are we using them in the best possible way? And I think in our industry here in higher education, right, we'll ask some tough questions. Are we using these tools? Yes. Are we using them responsibly, equitably? Can we trust them for the decisions that we're now having them do for us or having them help us with? These are going to be tough questions that I think our community is going to ask us. And the question is how far have we moved down that road?
Yeah, I agree entirely. And I hear so many conversations and discussions going on where these sorts of questions are coming up, but I don't hear the questions discussed a lot. And I really see like higher ed is going to change. We know that it's going to continue to evolve, especially around this technology. We're going to have to figure out how to teach and learn differently than we have. We're going to have to figure out how to differentiate our institutions. We can't just use knowledge transfer anymore. That's not enough of a differentiator. I think there are a lot of other conversations that need to be happening. And I really just see higher ed as a great place for those conversations because we have so many experts in so many fields, whether it's the impact that it's going to have on the economy or the future of work or just the critical thinking, the creativity. This technology, and we've seen it with social media, the technology has an impact on the way we live and the way we think. So I think that, if we could get ahead of this and start being intentional with some of the ways that we're integrating these technologies into our lives, I think that could go a long way towards creating a better environment and society for us down the road.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of like one attempt we've made at that. And again, it's the first attempt and we're trying to build on it in the right way, is to try to get our faculty more aware, more curious and more engaged. Because again, we found the natural innovators. And what we built off of that is we created a forum for faculty to participate in an exercise of how will AI impact our scholarly values? That was just a term that we use, right? But so, the things that we hold dear for why we exist as institutions, how is AI going to impact that? And we found some volunteers, 4 faculty members who sat on a panel that was moderated by our head of teaching and learning. I generated the idea, and then I tried to stand away from it so that it wasn't like, hey, Tom, the AI guy thing. So our teaching and learning person moderated it. And we had a faculty member from computer science, as you would imagine, the social sciences, from literature, and from the business school. Our teaching and learning leader facilitated a conversation that we then invited anyone who wanted to come be in the room and listen and participate in a Q&A to come in and listen to 4 perspectives amongst the peers for what do they think? And, and again, it was what they thought and then the dialogue they had with each other. We broadcast it. Right? So we also live streamed it. So if you couldn't get there, you could watch it live. And then, of course, we then recorded it and made it a digital asset that we then handed to each of the departments to say, you don't have to, but here's something maybe you want to share with your faculty. Maybe you want to turn into your own discussion, right? So it's all about getting more people on the playing field and engaging on the topic. And if they engage, that means they'll probably share and they'll listen. And if they listen, their views will evolve. And it all kind of gets us down that road. And I know of a couple of other institutions that have done similar type things. And so I think that all helps us figure out how to get down the road, right? It's about getting people to engage is always the first level of the first challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think starting those conversations or showcasing versions of those conversations are going to spur more discussions and, other topics that are specific to different areas of interest that people have. So we know that, higher ed institutions are going to evolve. What do you think higher ed, like marketers, admissions, what can those people start doing to prepare for the impact that these solutions are going to have on their job and their work?
I think you have to look at, we are at a point in time where we have a new powerful set of tools that give us an opportunity to step back and rethink how we do things. And then we also have the broader factors that are impacting the higher education industry. I could use that term, the sector, right? It's not just what the administration and some of their new policies are, but it's also the ROI conversation that we've been dealing with for a couple of years in terms of how are Americans sitting around the kitchen table talking about going to college, the cost of going to college, those types of things. It's about increasing regulation, more and more people kind of wanting to, quote unquote, look inside and see a level of transparency around what we're doing. It's the pressure from the workforce, right? Development aspect of it. You're educating people, you're handing them a piece of paper, but they're a partially finished product for hiring them into my company. And I'm dissatisfied with you because of that. And oh, by the way, there are certain industries that are now seeing these tools as the surrogate for hiring a new grad. So now new grads are freaked out that there's not a job market waiting for them out there, which perpetuates a problem we have already seen we're dealing with, right? So it's interesting, right? We have sector pressures that are making us feel very, very under attack and needing to figure out solutions for at a time where we're getting new tools. And that's what I think is making this really, really fun, in kind of a psychotic way, is that I think you have to meet this moment with, and this is a story I once heard. It's like, when there's a tornado on the plane, there's a difference between the cows and the buffaloes. The cows run away from the storm. The buffaloes run at the storm. And it's because they know that the only way to safety is through the storm. And I think the institutions right now that are meeting this moment by running to the storm, being willing to confront the criticisms rather than defend what they've been doing, I think is a stronger strategy. I think how would these new tools allow us to actually deal with some of these challenges, including if I've got an enrollment cliff, I have to change the way that I think about populations that we could attract and why they would want to come to us. And you see these some, a very small number, making these types of bold decisions in the same way that South New Hampshire University did a generation ago and Western Governors did a generation ago. Look where they sit today. Look how well they're positioned with these new tools now to do things at a level that, even the established R1 community maybe can't do. So I think what we're going to see is that the innovators, the leaders who adopt innovation and out of the box thinking are going to be rewarded by getting to the other side of the storm sooner. What that looks like, I think, does depend on the kind of institution you are. But I do think it's a run towards the storm moment.
Yeah, I agree entirely. One of the last questions I always ask everybody is what specific use cases are most useful to you in the work that you do?
Can I answer a little different question? Like which
You bet.
ones are the most intriguing and like most impactful that I think? So because again, I think there's I'm a high level administrator, right? So people will tell you Tom doesn't do anything except organize meetings for people to come to. Here's the one I think is the most intriguing. And it actually happens in the classroom, which is why I love to talk about the pedagogical challenge that we're confronted with is, when I came into higher education, I'm not a lifer. I came into the industry and had to learn the industry by just asking a lot of questions and being naive and being batted back. Kind of people taught me about kind of the research of Bloom, right, and the value of one-to-one learning. And then I've listened to over the course of my time in higher education, people talk about how the ratios of instructors and TAs to students continues to go up and how that decreases the quality and the aptitude around the learning outcomes. And then I look at these tools that we've been introduced with, and you can see the nirvana of Bloom's one-to-one learning opportunity through these tools, supported by the deep subject matter experts who've created the content and designed because of their expertise in pedagogical. I think you can see a one-to-one opportunity here, but it's delivered very differently than the way that our structures are today. I think that's the most intriguing opportunity in the industry right now. Right now, we talk about personalization, but if you go past personalization, you start thinking about what's the one-to-one future. Is that one-to-one just about you learn my topic? Or could it also be you're learning these topics really well and you're pipelined into the career that you think you want to start as a one-to-one opportunity as well? It just looks like the value proposition could be really different for higher education, for those who could see something really different from what they do today. That's what I think is the most intriguing.
Yeah, and I see so many institutions just figuring out how to leverage the technology for, efficiency, which I get. But, like you said, the transformative nature of these tools to really get us to reimagine better ways, different ways to do what we're trying to accomplish or to accomplish different things than we have even thought about doing previously. And I think, a lot of these foundation model companies talk about, the future of personal assistants where everyone has their own AI personal assistant, like connected to them. I think that's going to give us opportunities to explore our world, our knowledge in ways that we've never had before. So it's exciting.
It really is, and I tell the story about, so many of us use Instacart today, right, to have things delivered to our doors. I remember a company, 2000, had raised the most money of any startup to that point in time. It was called Webvan. It was the first attempt to deliver groceries, over the internet. And it failed miserably. It wasn't a bad idea. It's just that technology wasn't mature enough to deliver it. So, but the technology of the internet got better. We got things like geotagging. And so all of a sudden now certain things that they struggled with and why they failed and lost all that money had been solved as technology matured. I try to keep that in mind when people are talking about like AI. It's like, these things are going to get better. They're going to talk better. We're going to end up with standards, so they're more interoperable. And so you have to think about not just what you can do today, but where might we be in 3 years from now? Because it'll also take us 3 years to get the organizational to pivot. We need that much time to get the organizational pivot, right? So this is where I think strategy, it's a really, really interesting way to think about strategies. Like I get the organizational to pivot while these tools are becoming mature, where I could actually do this. And how do you intersect them at some point, some point in the horizon on the future is what I think is a really interesting, challenge for today's leaders.
Certainly is. Tom, can't thank you enough for taking some time and sharing your thoughts and insights with us. If our audience wants to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I tell them to just start with LinkedIn, and just kind of connect with me there, and love to always hear people's perspectives or their reactions to the things I've got to say, whether they agree or disagree. It's all about creating conversations. And I usually learn a lot. So I tell people, find me on LinkedIn, and again, it's going to be a fun ride. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely, Tom. Appreciate it. Tom's insights from UC Irvine offer a masterclass in institutional AI transformation. What stands out is their holistic approach. Rather than limiting AI discussions to specific departments, they've created space for innovation across their entire mission. This comprehensive framework demonstrates how institutions can move beyond efficiency gains to truly reimagine their work. The Thousand Flowers Bloom strategy brilliantly leverages higher education's natural tendencies towards decentralized innovation. By supporting early adopters and then amplifying their successes, UC Irvine has created organic momentum that spreads across departments. Tom's vision of AI enabling Bloom's one-to-one learning represents the transformative potential these tools hold for education. Rather than simply taking current processes and making them more efficient, he challenges us to envision fundamentally different ways of delivering on higher education's core mission. I loved his buffalo analogy, running towards the storm rather than away from it. This really captures the strategic imperative facing higher education and gives that sense of urgency that I think we should all be feeling about this technology. Whether it's enrollment cliffs, ROI questions, workforce pressures, institutions are facing challenges now, and those that embrace AI innovations may find themselves better positioned for the future than those who resist change. Please reach out to me with unique ways that you're integrating AI into your professional and personal lives. And as always, blue skies and keep creating. Thanks for listening to AI for You. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to higher ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.